My name is Elizabeth Anderson, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Society of International Law. Welcome to Tiller House, our home here in Washington, and welcome to Washington for your summer associate experiences. This is the first of our summer associate briefing series. Usually 2 or 3 of these briefings we have during the summer, geared toward the summer associates in the law firms that are sponsors of the societies and activities. And I really want to take a minute and thank the law firms where many of you are working who make this and many of our programs possible. And they are Arnold and Porter, Debevoise and Plimpton, Freshfields, Brookhouse Derringer, Sullivan and Cromwell, White and Case, Covington and Burling, Dewey and LeBouf, McDermott, Will and Emery, Picard, Kenson Rowe, Sidley Austin, and Troutman Sanders. So again, thanks to them, and I can thank Abby in particular and White and Case for their support tonight. It's my great pleasure to introduce a terrific panel, and they're going to tell you a little bit about their careers, the practice of international law, and advice that they might have for pursuing careers in this field. And then I hope we'll have lots of time for question and answer, and you won't be shy about picking their brains. I know that they'll be happy to share their insights. We're going to begin with Abby Cohen-Smutny, who's a partner at White and Case here in Washington. Abby is a leading specialist in international arbitration, and she has expertise in a wide range of matters, including public international law, treaty-based claims, international investment protections, expropriations, disputes with state enterprises, issues of state responsibility, sovereign immunity, political risk, and on and on and on. And her full bio is on your seats there. She regularly practices before an alphabet soup of arbitral bodies, and that they are listed as well, and is really one of the leading practitioners in this area. You're very lucky to have her here tonight to tell you a little bit about international arbitration practice. She also lectures, in addition to her practice, at various fora, including has spoken at Cambridge, Lauderpack Research Center, and at American University's Washington College of Law. And she also serves as a member of the ASIL Executive Council. Abby will be followed by another leading international lawyer, indeed the president of the American Society of International Law, David Caron, who's visiting here this week from California, where he's co-director of the Law of the Sea Institute and co-director of the Miller Institute on Global Challenges in the Law at UC Berkeley. And he's also the William McSiner Distinguished Professor of Law there. He has broad expertise in the field of public international law, and in particular in the area of law of the sea and in international arbitration. He has served as a commissioner with the precedent panel of the United Nations Compensation Commission in Geneva, also as chair of the advisory board for the Institute of Transnational Arbitration, and as a member of the bars of the state of California and England and Wales. He's licensed he also practices as a barrister with the chambers at 20 Essex Street. And David is, as I said, our fearless leader here at ASIL. And we're very lucky to have him with us here tonight. And finally, we'll hear from Him Das, who's the Assistant General Counsel for International Affairs at the U.S. Treasury Department, where he has responsibility for all international legal financial issues that the Treasury Department deals with, and that's a big portfolio, and I'm sure he'll describe it for you. Before that, Him spent a couple of years in the White House as a legal advisor on the National Security Council, and before that at the Legal Advisor's Office at the State Department, so has experience in the public practice of international law. And with that, I will turn it over to Abby to tell us a little bit about her career and her best advice for you.
Well, we talked about trying to keep our initial comments brief so we have enough opportunity to answer your questions, so we can be sure that we're directing our comments to what you're really interested in hearing about. I don't know quite where else to begin, except maybe to just give you my own anecdote of how I got involved in what I do and what it is that I do, my own career path, and then just to describe briefly what that entails, and then I think the others will do the same. And then we can, I hope, ask or answer questions that you would have. We won't ask the questions. I grew up in part in Israel and in part in the United States. And when I went to law school, for me, the main reason for going to law school was to be involved in international dispute resolution. I didn't have attorneys in my family. I didn't quite know exactly what that meant, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so I really went into the law focusing on how to get into international dispute resolution. It didn't almost matter to me, what subject that was. And because I didn't have a lot of guidance, the way I chose what to do after law school is I literally looked for the kinds of firms that you are all already either working with or interning with, a firm that had a lot of offices around the world, with the assumption that that must mean that they were doing things international. And I don't know if it was fate or luck that brought me to White and Case, but I interviewed. I really just liked the people there and thought, okay, here's where it's happening. I took a look at the bios of the partners that were there at the time, and I thought, this is what I'd like to do. And I was, I think, fortunate that luck and timing brought me to the DC office of White and Case at a time when it was a small office, and sure enough, there was a lot of international arbitration work. And I got into it right away. And my time at White and Case, I think probably, I started at White and Case in 1989, so it was already a while ago. And at that time, international arbitration, and certainly, arbitration involving state parties, was really still a very, I'd say, small part of what was going on in private practice. Very few firms had that kind of practice, and it was because at the time, Charles Brower, now a retired partner of the firm, a former State Department official, he was acting legal advisor for a time at the State Department, and he was already at that point a judge on the Iran-U.S. Claims Tribunal. So because of his presence at the firm, a certain type of case was attracted, and I latched onto him. And the first 5 or 6 years of my practice was a real mix. It was international arbitration of the type that I'll describe in a moment, as well as a whole variety of every other kind of litigation and dispute resolution, some of which had nothing to do with things international, but I was patient and just figured if I stayed there, and I would get to continue to do the kind of work I was interested in. And I've been at White and Case ever since, and I think that's perhaps rare that one goes to one place and that's where but every year it was just more of the really good, interesting kind of work, this international arbitration work, and I just loved it and I stayed. What has helped me, what's helped me and what I see helps those who come through our practice are just, this doesn't sound very glamorous perhaps, but just great advocate skills is what makes the difference. It's not, at least in my experience, the ability to speak multiple languages, although that's nice. It's not, at least beginning, it doesn't start off with having a great knowledge necessarily of the substantive area of international law. It's the interest and the ability to learn it as you need it and to go out and find it. So the intellectual curiosity, the drive to learn more what you don't know, and just to write really well, to have an extreme attention to detail, to be a really hard worker, and just to have the knack of advocacy. That's what has helped me, and that's what I know over the years watching those who are interested. A lot of people are interested in the idea of it, and then they come in and they see how hard the work really is to be an advocate, and the day in, day out seems, and then they drift off because thinking about it in the abstract seems more interesting than really doing it. So I have found that for those who are interested in doing this work, what will help is just, the dedication to being a really excellent advocate. And we can talk about that more. And in terms of advice, it was perhaps, and this is something I had just said to David, I think a little bit one's, a product of one's time. There are, I think, a lot more opportunities now than there were then to do this kind of work. On the other hand, more people are aware of it now than they were before, and maybe it's more competitive. And so I do think there are a lot of opportunities in private practice to get involved in things international, perhaps more so for sort of obvious reasons. Our global economy means that almost every aspect of the practice of law has an international element, but certainly dispute resolution, things international, it's now, I'd say, mainstream of any large national law firm has an international dispute resolution aspect to it, and that wasn't the case. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. Let me maybe pass the baton, and then we can come back and talk about the differences of the various career paths.
All right, so I will do the same, and I'll do it with 3 rules. They're not rules, really, but that's okay. So the first one is be flexible on your subject. For me, the Vietnam War was a war I disagreed with, but I believed in service to my country. So I went to the Coast Guard Academy, and I served in the Coast Guard, which also matched a love I had for the oceans. And from there, I went to study in Britain for a year and then went to law school, and it was going to be all about the oceans and the environment. That was my focus. And during my last year of law school, and therefore, I was also a little older and I was in a rush, so I said no clerkship. And in my last year of law school, along comes this clerkship at the Iran U.S. Claims Tribunal, a different direction. One I took, and one that was just determinative of so much that followed. And I guess it goes in part to what something Abby was saying, that part of being a lawyer is some very fundamental skills, and it is very connected, one field to another. And so it's good to just be flexible, I think. You may think of the substantive area you've grown up with that you really want to hold on to. And I certainly have not let go of the oceans in all this time. But it's good to be flexible. The second is that historical events, meaning big events, sweep up a lot of people. And there's, I guess, explain that more fully, before law school I mentioned I was studying in Britain for a year. And that was the time of the hostage crisis in Iran. And I was kind of watching it in the news, but little did I know that sort of there's this giant event and it's going to reach me at some point. And I think as the more I go on, the more I can see that this is not an accident. They just involve a lot of people, and they will. And so maybe you're going to be somewhere with British Petroleum in a couple of years. I'm not sure where, but it's something to be aware of, that in some ways there's a time lag there to keep in mind, that it's rolling, it's developing. It took several years for the tribunal to come in being. I just happened to come along right at the outset of the tribunal. So that's a second rule. And the last that's related is to value the significance of everyone around you. Probably the most influential person in my life was Charles Brower, the same person. But the second, well, there's a couple of people, but a very important group are all the other clerks that went through the Iran tribunal. And that group generated a certain cohort of people in arbitration that all knew each other. And so I think part of a task is, what is that group? And you may fortuitously, as I did, end up in such a group, but there are other structured ways. And so the American Society of International Law has a young practitioners group. Something like the Institute for Transnational Arbitration has a young arbitrators group. In that room, in 10 years' time, will be a lot of the main people walking around, the main young people. And it's not clear in the beginning, but it's true. And so it's just important to value. You've already winnowed down a lot. And it's you're a very talented group, and you should be aware that it's something to be valued. So I'll pass at that point.